Well, the waits are over. Louisiana's high school football season is here. We'll be at games in just a couple of days. And also the much talked about little schedule preview where we talk about some of the top games around Louisiana is now finally here since the recruiting news has slowed down. This is Louisiana versus all y'all's Recruit Dat Boot. I'm Jarrett Roser. He's Sam Spiegelman. And we have gamified this schedule talk in an interesting way that we'll see how chaotic it gets between how much is going to be going on as well as just the fact that I'm at that point in the day where the caffeination is about to take me off the rails. So, Sam, it's Tuesday afternoon as we record this. We'll be at a game together on Thursday night in the New Orleans area. How are we feeling about actually getting back to the boot and kicking this thing off for real?
Yeah, the road to get to taping this episode has been a daunting one, Jarrett Roser. But at what we're taping post 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, we're past our normal taping time. The day is getting hectic and more expensive as the hours go on, but we are powering through. This time tomorrow, I'll be at a practice in Baton Rouge. We'll be gearing up for games Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Football is back in the boot. I've been to Georgia. I've been to North Carolina. I've been to Alabama. I've been to Mississippi. I've been waiting for this, where we're going to be in Louisiana. We're ready for the season. And honestly, this is a topic that I threw out like in the middle of June or July when, sociopaths start looking at their high school schedule. So I'm giddy. I'm giddy to see. We talked about this a little bit last week and over the weekend, and I'm anxious to see what you got in store. And for anyone who does not like it, obviously, please address that directly to Jarrett, our producer.
Producer, okay. I'm just adding titles as we go. So the way this is going to work is we'll, by the end of the show, get to looking more specifically at here's some of the big week one games, including the ones that we'll be at. But we have sort of gamified a look at the big picture schedule, somewhat inspired by some of these social media games of blind rankings where stuff, whether it be an NFL quarterback or a team or a fast food restaurant or whatever the case may be, the little logo pops up and you have to kind of put things in place, not knowing what might come next. And so with our expansive Louisiana versus all y'all and Recruit Dat Boot budget, I have literally 10 little glasses and Mardi Gras cups lined up in front of me with 10 to 15 different notable games from each week because the entire schedule week to week is loaded with great matchups. And I have a randomized list in terms of order where we'll bounce around the schedule between different weeks, and Sam will see a matchup from that week and get the choice of whether he wants to add that to his schedule or pass it. We'll say that you can pass on 2 per week. We have a lot of options for these different weeks, but by the third one, you have to take whatever you end up getting. And then I'll have the ability to kind of build a schedule based around yours. And so we'll end up with 20 picked games by the end of this and just kind of see, who likes the schedules best. Also note that each of us can only have the same team on our schedule twice to not, live in New Iberia with the Westgate Tigers or up on Forsyth with Neville or, whatever the case may be. You may be able to live in Tad Gormley with a variety of Catholic League teams, but you got to travel around a little bit based on, again, this is a game. This will probably not end up being where we end up on Friday nights, but just an opportunity to kind of pick some of these games and look at them a little bit more closely. How do we feel about that explanation as a foundation so far?
I thought it was excellent. I think we have the rule of twos. You can pass twice on a given week. You can only take 2 of the same team's games. And yes, we are not being held to actually being at all these. We have restrictions. We have budgetary confinements. We have obligations to maintain our family. I can't, I have obligations to other states and other teams and other prospects to cover. But in this hypothetical ideal world of only covering LHSAA games, of course, this is where our hearts will be. And I feel pretty strongly about that without blindly picking any of my teams so far.
Well, let's jump right into it, man. And the first week that we have popped up on the little randomizer is week 4, and so we'll see what your first option is here as a week 4 game. We'll kind of talk about some of these a little bit as we go. You got a pretty good one right off the bat as an option here, and it's one that I very well could end up at. Actually, it's one that we both could end up at. Alexandria versus Opelousas in week 4. Would you like to put that one on your schedule, or you want to pass and take your chances with another option?
Well, I happen to be very familiar with that week because I will be making a pit stop somewhere in the
Yeah.
boot, confirmed yesterday and again this morning by both parties. So I will be dipping back into Louisiana for that week, and that one is certainly was among the ones I was considering. Yeah, I'm gonna take it. You know what? It was in the top 2 if I were to stay in Louisiana for that Friday night. The two backs going at each other's throats, Deshaun Ford and JT Lindsay, and then you have Corey Amos. Can he be the neutralizer with someone like JT Lindsay, who obviously we've talked? I guess we haven't talked, but we've seen what he did in his jamboree after a stellar offseason between 7-on-7 and track, speed, quickness is going to be the heart and soul of an Alexandria team that I expect to make a strong push deep into the season. Maybe we'll see them in the Superdome. I'm going to take it.
Yeah, great breakdown. And that we see already part of the game where there might be another game on that week that you rank a little bit above it, but who knows what the cup holds, you know? Who knows?
I do know the games that I would rank below it, so I'm ready. I'm rocking. This takes a real sicko to know the schedule this well.
This is where I told you it might be more fun if you don't prep as much, but then at the same time, you get to start playing little Zach Galifianakis calculus in your head from The Hangover type vibes of piecing this thing together.
We'll bring Josh on for the person who's not taking stock of their schedule.
So I picked here Jeanneret versus Lauraville, a smaller school game, some great talent on both sides of it. Really local matchup that'll be fun at this point in the season. Jeanneret, despite graduating Treville Frederick, has some great 2025 guys like Zaire Kolar and Dominic Lewis. They've also got a young 2027 and Morris Lee Walters, who I like an awful lot amongst Louisiana's top pass catchers as a sophomore this year. Lauraville has obviously the Texas Tech committed two-way lineman and Dylan Singleton, and some other talent on that roster, and Kylan Polk and company. I think as much as I do like that matchup, I'm going to take a swing at another and see what we got. And
Lauraville, more like Boraville to Jarrett Roser.
Not at all, man.
I would have taken it, man. You love those rivalry games.
I end up with another good one, man.
Oh, wow.
And so
maybe this is rigged.
This will go. I'll go ahead and leave this one on my schedule, even though I'm still giving myself the 2-pass option that I'm offering you per week. But we have the St. Charles Catholic Comets versus De La Salle. Is going to end up. So you end up with a good one. 2 teams that in different divisions now, with St. Charles moving up. They'll be in Division 2 Select. De La Salle's in Division 3 Select. Both have title hopes. And St. Charles Catholic obviously has its string of state championship appearances in recent years. They had that heartbreak at the end last year against Calvary Baptist. They have to replace an awful lot. They have some good talent back this year, as much as they do have to replace. We'll see how those guys kind of come together through a tough schedule early on. De La Salle, same sort of thing. I think one of the notable prospects on their side that we might not talk as much about De La Salle during the course of this, but Ronald Cash, the young wide receiver, is somebody to keep an eye on, and they've got a few others. We'll talk a little bit. Actually, we will talk a little bit about De La Salle toward the end of this, but that's going to be my week 4 game. I end up with St. Charles and De La Salle, and so we'll jump back to you with a week 6. And your first option to keep or defer is, if I can unwrap the little paper, I did such a good job with this, is Madison Prep versus Southern Lab. Obviously a huge Baton Rouge matchup. Programs.
Yeah. It's one of those rivalry games, it's in the city, 2 teams that are going to be feisty. But I'm gonna pass on this one. I'm gonna see what else is waiting for me behind door number 2.
Door number 2 is Rain versus Turlings.
Purple Rain. Yeah, give me another pass. Let's roll the dice. Our first double pass.
And so this is what you end up with here.
This is where I'll be.
This
You can lock it up.
This is a pretty good one. I might end up here in real life. Archbishop Shaw versus St. James.
Yeah. Is it in beautiful downtown Battery? Just pinch me. Shaw is one of those teams that, again, is going to be competing for a state championship this year. They are loaded in their senior class with one of the best receivers in the state in Jacob Washington, one of the best running backs in the state, Jasper Parker, committed to Michigan. Both of them, of course, have one of the best safeties in the 2027 class. I'm going to leave him nameless, not to upset anybody at this point. But the Shaw talent is back on the West Bank. Hank Tierney, future Hall of Famer, current Hall of Famer, decide at a later date. But he is a Hall of Famer, and he's going to have that team chomping at the bit. And we know it's a different era of football in beautiful downtown Battery, but that has not stopped them from competing for championships. That's a game that's going to be a good measure for both teams. And I'm pretty sure it's in beautiful downtown Battery, which if you want a good Friday night, look for Mr. Preston. He's got a bowl of jambalaya waiting for you. It's going to be a good time in BDV.
Yeah, no doubt about it. A look at those other two games, Madison Prep and Southern Lab, both with some good talent. The Johnson brothers from Madison Prep, notable in the old veteran quarterback at this point, the grizzled Tylen at control of the offense, and then the youngster Landon playing all over the place. He's another 2027 prospect I like. Southern Labs got some key pieces back from the Dome team. Amarion Asbury, the Southern commit. Denham Hunt, the 2026 two-way receiver DB. Rain has one of the top uncommitted seniors that I like in the speedster, Kylan Wheeler, out there with the Wolves. Turlings has a two-lane commit in Gresham Perry and a lot of other key pieces from a team that was really good last year, has been consistently really good. I'll go ahead and take a look at another game here and see what we end up with. So I don't think we've even seen a Catholic League team yet so far.
It's calling for us in crunch time.
And so I end up with a game that I could end up at. It was one that I was at last year, and it's St. Martin's versus Riverside, which is somewhat of a de facto district title game in a lot of ways if the league shakes out the same way it did last year, where you end up with two of the most prolific running backs in the state in LSU commit Harlan Berry and the small but mighty Dedrick Lasty for those Riverside Rebels. They were in the Dome last year. I think they have a great chance to be in that mix as a potential state championship team this year if they can get through Harlem and the Saints and some of those other top challengers along the way. That's one I like an awful lot. I know Riverside has to replace a lot in the trenches, but they have guys that I think are ready to take that next step and certainly loaded with talent all over the field around their quarterbacks and on in the secondary, some guys playing two ways and whatnot. Moving on to
whoa. That's a great game. 2 years ago we were there. I think you were with me. I know Garland was, for Harlan Berry versus Riverside. I thought that was a bit of his coming out party to see against Riverside is a blue collar program. No matter who they're replacing, they always have depth. They always extremely disciplined, extremely hard nosed, tough physical style of football. Harlan Berry topped 100 yards. You probably wouldn't know that because he was getting swallowed up in each and every run and having to earn every single bit of his yardage. But that is where I think Harlan Berry started to, at least in my mind, present himself as a blue chipper, a 5-star level prospect, seeing what he was able to do, basically creating on his own as a receiver and a running back. That's just one of the better tests for the St. Martin's schedule if you're trying to see a Harlan Berry in a tough matchup.
No doubt. It's one that Riverside got the best of last year, despite Harlem rushing for, I think it was like 250 and still ending up with a bigger game from Dedrick behind that Riverside line. Looking at week 10, the first pick that you have a chance at is Bunkie versus Marksville, a nice rivalry matchup up there in Senla with a couple of teams with some notable talent, including obviously the Houston committed DB Kyle Johnson of Bunkie.
Yeah, I hate to say this, but I'm going to pass on this. I do love Kyle. I think he's a fantastic prospect, especially I think his future is very bright in the secondary. But I know this. I know what this schedule looks like for Week 10, and I know that there
Yeah.
are some games that might be a little bit more hard hitting, right up Sam's alley.
Yeah, other guys to watch in that game for folks: Dylan Compton, the quarterback at Bunkie Zion, lead linebacker Lydrick Murray and Monk Pryor and company over at Marksville. Your second option here, if it can hold a candle to Bunkie and Marksville, is Neville at Alexandria.
Well, yeah, I'm going to take this one, put it on the schedule. That'll be my second for Ash, so you can take them off my schedule.
Oh yeah,
I think that they actually play Destrehan as well, so they have a really um, coach over there is gearing them up for a Superdome run. You can tell, but I love this matchup. We talked about Ash before and JT Lindsay, but you want to talk about a staunch test in Neville and one of the safeties that you and I have texted privately about. Someone I think who I have my eyes on as a junior is Juju Burns over there, the talented safety for Neville. They got a bunch of young players. This is a Neville squad that we think should be, again, making a pretty deep run into the season, but they are younger at a lot of key positions. Juju is one of their returning stars who has picked up a lot of recruiting interest, but it's someone that I would love to get my eyes on. And against a team that two dome hopefuls, I think that'll be a great end of season gauge for the playoffs because we expect one of them to probably take off, if not both.
yeah, that's a game that there's a good chance I may end up at. Neville is really high on the list of teams that I want to see at least once, if not twice, for a lot of guys on that roster that I think are really talented that I haven't had as much of a chance to see in person as some others. So I went ahead and grabbed another Week 10 game that I'm mulling over right now, and the one that I picked out of the cup was Shaw versus St. Charles Catholic, which is another monster game. Two teams we've talked about a little bit already. You have a Shaw game on the schedule. I have a St. Charles game. I know that I have some more games of each of those teams earlier in the season. And so, again, knowing that Week 10 is loaded with monster matchups, I'm going to dig into this
Wayne
little
Stein
glass
versus
here.
Hank Tierney is a good old fashioned brawl fest, man. I'm feeling black and blue just thinking about it.
Came up with another good one. I think I manifested this a little bit with Catholic Baton Rouge versus Zachary to end the season.
Pinch me.
That's where I've been the last couple of years to end the season. They've been playing it on Thursday night, and so it's worked out well to catch that one plus another. But that's two teams that obviously a state champion, a state runner-up from a year ago in their respective brackets are big-time Baton Rouge rivals in recent years, and despite having to replace key pieces on both sides of that rivalry, they should both be geared up again to be top five-ish teams heading into this season. I think, we like a lot of what they have stepping in to replace some of what they graduated. I think a lot of eyes are certainly on the Catholic quarterback spot and filling the big shoes left by Daniel Beal and Barry Remo in that running back role, but they're loaded with running back options, including the 2027 guy, Jaden Miles. They've got a great line up front with Irv Smith and company. They've got wide receiver options all over the place. And so whichever quarterback's able to take that and run with it, has a well-stocked cast around him. The defense, obviously, with the Bradford brothers and company, loaded again. Zachary, love Caleb Gonzalez taking over and getting a chance for this to be his time at quarterback. You have to replace Trey'Dez Green, but Christian Brooks is impressing me more and more every time I see him with that wide receiver group. We'll see how their trench group comes together, but there's a lot to like for Zachary. I don't know if you have more to add to that before I go on to this next week.
How do you add more to that? That was exemplary.
My ego is going to be through the roof after this with all the beautiful compliments you're giving me. But we head on to Week 5, where your first option here is Lafayette Christian versus Central of Baton Rouge.
Wow. Oh, wow. I do like that game. You know what? Another team, LCA always has a really pretty tough schedule. They really, since Trev was there, and then even subsequently, they've continued to load up. I mean, obviously they played Ruston last year. And then the same can be said about Central BR. We've talked about their opener against De La Salle, but I've seen a couple of big fish on the Central BR schedule, and you could add LCA to that too. But this one is, you know, there's a lot of interest, and we'll get to it more if the opportunity on both DK Mays and also KD Mays. But I'm going to pass on this one for now.
Okay, let's see what else you got
LCA is
there.
very young. I think I got time to go back to them.
Your next option here, a couple teams that have come up quite a few times. Just some great matchups in the river parishes. St. James versus the St. Charles Comets.
Oh, yeah. I like this one. I'll take this one. This will knock out St. James for me, but this is what we talk. I mean, I think we didn't get to talk a little bit about Wayne Stein and the St. Charles Comets. I think this is a team that we've grown accustomed to seeing playing on championship Friday, Saturday, or Thursday over the past couple of years, and taking up for Coach Monica. It's really difficult to say that this program has been even playing at a higher clip, but the success speaks for itself. They gave us an absolute thriller in the Dome last year, and it really is that cliche mentality that next man up. And it's a team that I believe in the culture, I believe in the locker room, I believe in the leadership, I believe in the traits that they've built their program around and the values. And we've seen it under Coach Monica, we've seen it under Coach Stein. That's going to be a tough team, and if that's either in Laplace or in downtown Battery, it's going to be a hell of an environment for that showdown.
Yeah, one of the seniors to watch from a recruiting standpoint, Noah Tucker, committed to Arkansas State. They've got a young guy I want to see more of this year, Preston Cambry, who's a 2027, I believe. I'm trying to decide whether to take this LCA Central game or pick another. I'm trying to think of kind of where some of the rest of the schedule lines up. And I'll go ahead and take the LCA versus Central game. You talked a lot about those teams already. As much as we'll see kind of a new era of LCA, new coaching staff, Juwan Johnson now in Baton Rouge in purple and gold. You've got a great group in Braylon Walker, Brennan Walker, Braden Allen, guys that are going to be able to put points on the board. Calvin Trey Parker and Jalen Noel. So a lot of weapons there behind the offensive line, as well as Caleb Campbell and company. Chris Hilaire, a ball hawk on that defensive side, along with Sage Ryan's little brother Sky. And so a lot of talent to watch for the years to come for sure. I'll go ahead and take that one as my week 5 game, and we'll kind of look at week 3 next.
Hit me.
First option, JFK versus Sanama. I think it's a Thursday night game.
Yeah, JFK has some speed. Sanama, always a tough matchup. They showed that last year with their deep run. But hit me with my second choice.
Yeah, you'd be looking there at Caleb Ricks and company trying to slow down James Evan and Kingston Jones and that great group of wide receivers around Amani Darrensburg for the Cougars. Your next option is Edna Carr versus McDonough 35.
Pinch me. Sign me up. It's hard to, if you like wide receiver talent, it's hard to ignore this game. You'll have Teron Francis, the number 1 receiver in Louisiana, going into his senior year from Carr, and a matchup against Ja'Kai Anderson, who is, trying to establish himself as the number 1 receiver in Louisiana for 2026. But I mean, Edna Carr is absolutely gung-ho loaded. If you like LSU, then you definitely like these Edna Carr Cougars. They got Aiden Hall has been one of the big risers for Rivals after what I thought was a splendid offseason. I thought he had a sensational sophomore season. I think he is in line for a monster junior season. I think that we're going to have a really fun, compelling debate about Blaine and Aiden, because they are 2 of the best safeties in the state, and the country, with differing skill sets, and both just bring such a pizzazz to their defense. And then up front, you have Corey Adams committed to Ole Miss and Big Rich Anderson committed to LSU, and the combination of them working in that front 7 with Edna Carr's, seniors that are obviously going to be playing big roles, and Aiden, who can come play from all over the secondary and contribute. They should be flying around on defense. And then 35, Ja'Kai's older brother is, of course, had a really great offseason as well. We saw him in the OT7 situation. We saw him at LSU camp, someone that I think that should be playing somewhere on Saturdays. And that when Coach Daggs and Carr are playing, no one knows how to mess with these Cougars quite like Frank Daggs, and that's going to be a very intense rivalry game. A lot at stake, a lot of points, and a good measuring stick for both of these teams pretty early on in the season.
No doubt about it. I mean, 4 LSU commits as well as all the other guys on that field that'll be heading elsewhere for college. So the JFK Santa Maria games on the board. I also just pulled out Dunham versus St. Charles Catholic as an option for me for week 3. I already have the comments on the schedule for week 4 for me. And so I know there's some other Dunham games in here to potentially end up with, and I'll go ahead and take another look for week 3, potentially catch Dunham in one of these other matchups elsewhere. And I end up with a pretty good one. Another school that I'll, in this hypothetical, see twice in the span of 3 weeks. LCA versus Westgate will be my
Nice.
week 3 matchup. We talked a lot about LCA just a moment ago. Westgate is a team that I feel like is somehow, for Westgate standards, a little bit under the radar right now from just talking to people and not hearing people mention their name as much as I think they probably should be mentioned as a Division I state championship contender, because that's a team that obviously on the fly was trying to adjust to life without Jabari Antoine for a big chunk of last year, and then only barely got him back in time to play Ruston. Really gave Ruston as tight of a game in the playoffs as anyone did. And now you bring Jabari, the Miami commit, and a lot of other talent back from that team. Diamond Jackson, the Mississippi State commit, and that list goes on. I know they have to replace Demarion Johnson and some other guys up front, but I know that they have talent back there too, on top of all of the wealth of athletes all over the field on both sides of the ball. And so I like Westgate an awful lot in Louisiana's foray and Division I non-select landscape. And I think that LCA versus Westgate game early on in the season will be an awful lot of fun.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, they have talent in the secondary. They have talent on offense. We're going to see Jabari Antoine not only play a ton on defense. I think we're going to see him not only at quarterback, we're going to see him a little bit at running back. We're going to see him at receiver. They have options at quarterback where Jabari can show his talent and they can create mismatches so they can beat you in a multitude of ways. They have Diamond as well. So you think about the threat of Jabari and Diamond going downfield on you. Obviously, they have options out of the backfield. And yeah, there's a lot of – it's Westgate. They don't just rebuild. They reload. I think you pointed it out last week, and I couldn't agree more. I think people are sleeping on Westgate. I think they're going to have a great season out there in Wampville, USA.
Your first option for week 2 is Karen Crow versus LCA, who LCA just continues to come up every single week's worth
Well,
of
let's
picks.
do it because we have to talk about Karen Crow. It's home to Chance Babineau, who is one of my favorite prospects in the 2026 class. He's someone that we didn't really talk. I guess we haven't paid enough attention to, and for some reason his recruitment just hasn't spiraled as I thought as it might. But he's obviously a dual sports standout, a fantastic football player, as well as a fantastic baseball player. I've always liked him.
He does everything because he's a baseball, basketball, track guy. He's as busy as anyone year round in the state.
Yeah, I've always liked him with the ball in his hands. I think he can play running back. I think he can play receiver. I think he could be a safety or a DB at some sort at the next level. So to see him he's only going into his junior season. We've talked about the show in different settings. Everyone's recruitment goes off at different times, but Chance was an early Michigan offer by Jim Harbaugh. And usually those are indicators that they have traits, film, and all the athletic profile. And I couldn't agree more. I think he's someone that's going to end up with a handful of P4 offers before it's said and done. Maybe this is the season we start to see a little bit more, and LCA will pose a nice test for that.
Yep, love Chance and some of the experience that the Bears have coming back. Also really like some of the young guys coming through there with the freshman duo, Carson Gursey, who will be backing up Chance as quarterback, and Hayden Monroe, the big athletic pass catcher and really just all around athlete. My first option for week 2 is Denham Springs versus Central. We talked a little bit about Central. This is a huge rivalry matchup. Old district rivalry before some things reshuffled around the Baton Rouge area. Denham's got Jerry Horn, one of the top uncommitted senior quarterbacks around the state, and Tylen Haynes and the Goldman twins and company around him. Brenton Paul is an interesting junior running back to watch. Rancher Miller, senior leader in that secondary. CJ Polk, and that list kind of goes on. I went ahead and looked at another game as a potential, second option for my week 2. And I think I'm going to go ahead and take this one, which will mark off another team for me doubling up. And that's those Comets, the St. Charles Catholic Comets that we've talked about a few times. I will take them as my week 2 game versus Lutcher, a matchup that is a slugfest every single year. Two teams that on their respective sides of the D2 bracket, select, non-select breakdown, are title hopefuls. Lutcher obviously has the Houston committed defensive lineman Rashad Sterling, the Cajuns committed speedy, versatile athlete in Trenton Cheney. Dwayne Jenkins' son Zach takes the reins of that offense now full time. He's got weapons around him in Trenton and Ashton Stark, and that list goes on. Ashton, a guy that I really like in that 2027 class, a Louisiana Tech legacy, son of former wide receiver Allen. And so Comets, Dogs, that's my week 2.
This is a game that, listen, if this doesn't happen in the Superdome in December, Lutcher has the makings of kind of that nucleus where if they get close this year, they're definitely going to make it next year. This is kind of what the cycle is like for Coach Jenkins. It's a year in the dome and a year really close, and I don't remember seeing them last year, so they might be back if we don't pay close enough attention, especially with Rashad, who I think is in line, to have a conversation. Is this guy a 4-star at the end of the season?
Your first option for week 8, and I'll just toss it to you and you can say everything that comes to mind. The Southside Sharks versus the Acadiana Wrecking Rams.
Yes. I have covered Southside in the past. I did not cover them when they ruled Malik Neighbors ineligible, unfortunately. But I'm not going to miss Coach Jess going against the standard in Lafayette. That is the Acadiana Wrecking Rams. I love Acadiana. A couple of their games were high options for me to get to this season. And if not this season, I definitely will be there next season because of the young talent. I did spend quite a lot of time around them Wrecking Rams last year, so they probably are sick of me to a certain degree. But between Darius McKinley, who has continued to build up his frame, he's going to be a different sort of player than Dom. But I think, a very impactful defensive lineman coming off of the edge for the Wrecking Rams. Colin DeBetta, Landon DeBetta, the DeBetta boys, all the DeBettas. It's Colin and Caden.
And there's a third DeBetta on the roster now this year.
Of course there is.
I don't know the youngest.
I just got the second one and I still butchered his name. I love the DeBettas. I love what we saw from him in camp. I went back and watched the film. I think there was no way he wasn't one of the best 2027 receivers in the state. Sometimes you get that marking when you look a certain way, but DeBetta can move. I'm very excited about their team, of course. Russell Babineau feels like he's been there 16 and a half years and is part of the coaching staff. But I just think he actually had a terrific offseason. He's always been someone that we've had our eye on. And last year, getting that experience at safety, also receiver. I see them being back in the Superdome. I think they have the pieces. It's upsetting that that they don't have both the McKinley boys, but I love how everything runs in the family over there in Lafayette. And I think, of course, I want to see what the Jess Curtis's Southside Sharks look like.
Yeah, that Acadiana team you mentioned you saw a lot. There was a point last year where I was seeing them so consistently that a couple of people said, okay, so next week, and just thought that I was with them every single week because I kept seeing them so consistently. This year they have a lot of fun matchups. Again, you mentioned Russell's senior year. Guy plays receiver, DB, return man, assistant coach, vibes coordinator, cheerleader, sells the popcorn, lets me in and out of the gate when it's time to get to the game. And
then he mops up the bathrooms when everyone leaves.
Yeah. So love him. Love that matchup for sure. You steal it, so it's not on the table for me. My first option is Ruston versus Alexandria, which is obviously another fantastic one. That as I look at us getting on the back half of our schedule picking, and I don't have either one of those teams yet, I'll go ahead and take that one. It's one that I could very well end up at in person. I think we've talked a little bit about Alexandria and JT Lindsay leading that offense. They're going to have two senior running backs, as well as some youngsters coming up behind those guys that will be kind of the bell cows as a part of this offense, just trying to get that running game going with Carson Sellers, the young quarterback, taking the reins, a guy that has a level of moxie to him that's going to be interesting to watch him once he gets to this district and how he handles some of these defenses, including Ruston, where you've got the LSU committed corner, Aiden Anding, his little brother, Jaden Anding. You've got the Louisiana Tech commit and Zarek Hill. And so as much as we look at, man, Ruston graduated an awful lot from that defense last year, they are still really stout on that side of the ball. And then obviously the flip side of that is you have an offense that brings back a lot of experience in Josh Brantley, the Tulane committed athlete at quarterback, Jordan Hayes, a fantastic running back prospect, Sam Nations, the center quarterback of the offensive line. He's headed to Northwestern State. Ahmad Hudson, the young, versatile pass catcher. He's working back from an injury right now, but someone to watch through the course of this year. And I will go ahead and lock that in, that Ruston versus Ash game for week 8.
Nice. Did anyone have a better jamboree than Aiden Anding, by the way?
Well, spoiler alert for the first week of Louisiana versus All Y'all Players of the Week. Aiden Anding is one of the high school players of the week with his 2 interceptions, including a pick 6 and a kickoff return to beat rival Neville in the Bayou Jam. So good call on that one.
Picked up right where he left off in the Superdome.
Your first option for week 9 is Brother Martin versus Warren Easton.
I like this game. Wow, this is Catholic League. I had to pause for a second. That especially because Brother Martin has a really young squad with a couple of guys that I would like to see. So I will take this. I know that the Brother Martin has a very young squad, but there's a lot of guys that I would love to see in Warren Easton, and we're talking about a district tune-up. Jalen Chapman, the LSU commit on the interior of the offensive line. He'll play tackle for Warren Easton, but I just think he's one of the best offensive linemen in the state, regardless of class. And he's continued to build up his frame, and seeing where he is junior year, I think this is a guy that can play guard or center when he gets to LSU and be the center for a couple of years in the middle of that offensive line. And you could say this, Jerry Phillips' son is now on the Warren Easton squad over there at 3019. They got a lot of longtime stalwarts to replace in Wallace Foster, a couple other replacements, but this is Easton, a lot like a lot of the other programs that we've discussed. There's a certain culture there about replacing, and they're going into the Catholic League, and they run the football, they play defense as good as anyone. So does Brother Martin. So 1, there's a lot of young talent, and 2, this game is going to go fast. They're going to be running the ball, be out of there in 2 hours, 20 minutes flat. Give me a break. See you at Gormley.
I'll take my first option for week 9, and it is not going to be that case because Turling's Catholic versus STM is not going to run the ball around and run that clock. They're going to sling the thing around. They're going to score an awful lot of points against one another. One of the great rivalries in the state. Turling's, no matter what year and what the expectations are of, this STM team is great and they're kind of rolling along. It is always one of the toughest games of the season for both of those teams. And this year, we talked about Turlings a couple minutes ago and Gresham Perry and some of those guys for the Rebels. We haven't talked about STM yet, but they kind of fall into that same vein I mentioned about Westgate. Everything that the 2-time defending state champion Cougars graduated, they're somehow a little bit under the radar this offseason, particularly by their standards. But I think they're going to be really formidable again. Cole Bergeron taking over at quarterback and doing what he does. Brian Broussard Jr., one of the DBs. And as I continue to list, I know I'll leave some folks out, but a team that despite a lot of new faces taking over bigger roles than they've experienced before, I think is going to be really, really good as always.
Yeah, I'm excited about Cole Bergeron taking over. We talked about Santa Acadiana a lot last year. When we saw them in the Jamboree, we saw some of Cole filling in for Sam after his Jamboree injury. And this is a guy we've seen in a couple of 7-on-7 settings and just in different instances. And I think he's someone with listen, a lot of STM quarterbacks have made it pretty far. No one better than our boy, Mr. Howard. But I think Cole might be the next, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's playing somewhere on Saturdays. But he's got a big season ahead to prove that.
No doubt. Jumping right to week 7. I feel like I should just start writing this one down for you. Neville versus Ruston is your first option for a week 7 game.
If I could, I would be there, but there's only so many miles and so many hours in a day to travel. But yeah, that was on my list. I would have given ungodly things to be at that game if certainly it would have worked out. But for all the reasons we talked about with Neville earlier, for all the talent on both sides of the ball for Ruston, and let's just give another shout out, a duplicate, Josh Brantley being back for Ruston. He is the catalyst for that team. One of the most underrated, if not the most underrated member of Tulane's class, a guy that I think, if this was 10 years ago, would be committed to a Power 4 team. But just the difference maker, what he brings at quarterback at 6'3" and 210, 215 pounds, and the complement of weapons around him between the Andings, Hudson, and all of the other senior talent returning. I think Ruston is a team I definitely am expecting to see in New Orleans in December.
My first option for week 7 we're on is a Meat versus Pine, which is a great game up there, North Shore area. Obviously, folks know a Meat just historically and what they bring to the table. They've got a good group back again this year, built around the senior quarterback, Jeremy Franklin. They've got some good speedy guys on the outside, as always, Braylon Taylor and Lionel Perkins, a couple of guys to watch there. Jalen Haywood, a big guy in the trenches. Pine, I think folks know about the big TCU committed offensive lineman and Jackson Jones, a guy that had, a few different Power 4 offers to choose from and committed to the Horned Frogs. That's on the table for week 7. I'm going to go ahead and take another swing here.
Passing up on Jackson Jones, you may live to regret that, Jarrett Roser.
I know. That's how I've felt the last couple of years, wanting to get out there. This one I can't even take anyway because it's another LCA game. Notre Dame versus LCA game that is two of the top teams in that district. Louis Cook and company, Jackson Casanova, I think it was all-state linebacker last year for the Pios.
What an amazing name for a linebacker.
Yeah, the LCA team that we've talked about a couple of times. And so
is this your game now by default?
This one is my game now by default, and it is a good one by default. Warren Easton, who I don't have on my schedule yet, Holy Cross, who I don't have on my schedule yet. And so you just spoke about Warren Easton a moment ago. Everything that's there, a team that is going to be hungry as can be this year after all of the turmoil of last year. Just excited to get back and join this Catholic League. They, in this week, will be matched up against a team that was the number 1 division select team last year and Coach Scott Watney's first season back at his alma mater. They've got to replace Cross Johnson and Kobe Young, the fantastic receivers, Canatella at quarterback, and some other pieces around that roster. Love the running backs in Caden Ando and Kieran Smith. And that Tigers group, I think all of the excitement last year of beating Curtis for the first time in school history, being the number 1 seed, making a nice run to the quarters, that's just the starting point for what Coach Watney and company are building over there. And so I like getting them on my schedule once again for my week 7 game.
No arguments from me.
And so now we wrap up with week 1 to close out these schedules. Your option, and I'm interested to see if any of these pop up as the games that we'll actually physically be at in a couple of days. Your first choice is Oak Grove versus Calvary.
Wow.
Do you keep it or do you pass knowing what's in New Orleans?
Yeah, I may live to regret, but I think the biggest thing is you have the ability to pass on the first game. So with those options still on the table, I'm going to pass. Give my shout out to the defending state champs. We'll probably see them in December. Check on those Louisiana Tech commits from up there in Oak Grove. And, Calvary also going to be gunning to be getting back. LSU commit Devin Harper on the offensive line. Heard he was absolutely brilliant this spring at Calvary. And, of course, James Simon, one of the best backs in the country, committed to UT. But give me what's next.
Your next option is St. Charles Catholic versus Newman.
I can't pick St. Charles. I think I might have them twice.
No, I have them twice. You have them once. So they've been on here an awful lot, but
Yeah,
you have the flexibility.
Wayne Stein's been getting plenty of love and he deserves it, but let's go with whatever's behind door number 3.
So this is what will be on your
gambling.
schedule.
And I'll be there, so I can stick to it.
This is not the game I think we both had in mind, but for my money, it might be the best game in the state on Friday night. Acadiana versus Ruston.
Let's rock. I would have Ruston is on my to-do list this year. Again, I'm expecting to see them either in the playoffs or in the Superdome for sure. For they do have big shoes to fill in replacing Ahmad Bro. But like we said, for all the reasons they got to be back, to be optimistic, Tulane commit Josh Brantley, LSU commits Aiden Anding, and then Ahmad Hudson, one of the best overall pass catchers in 2027. And having a blank, Rustin and who?
Acadiana
with Darius McKinley, all the DeBetta boys, Russell Babineau. They're going to be another team. It's basically a state championship preview. You can't do any wrong with that.
Yeah, that, another little spoiler for the channel for this week. I will have a top 50 rankings regardless of classification coming out later this week. And those two teams will be the top 2 ranked teams in the state going into the season on the Louisiana versus all y'all preseason top 50. That's a great one. I don't need to see any others. As much as I know where we plan to be on Friday, I'll take that Oak Grove versus Calvary game. I can't make it up there because I plan to have my breakfast in Ullman Stadium, uptown New Orleans, on Saturday morning before that K-State versus Green Wave game at 11 a.m. kickoff. But Oak Grove and Calvary might be the 2 likeliest, or certainly 2 of the likeliest state champions again this year to try and, in Calvary's case, defend that Division III select championship. Oak Grove will move up to Division III non-select after winning Division IV last year. We talked a little bit about Oak Grove, Calvary, everything that's there, the prolific quarterback Abram Wardell and all the talent around him, the Texas running back James Simon, Colby Thomas, Caleb Tucker, on down the list, the great defensive group with guys at every level: Ethan Sands, Cole Miller, Julius Moss, Braylon Huglon, et cetera, et cetera. That's a great one to start my schedule. And I'll add these on like a list form on the side for folks that are watching to kind of recap where we're all at. And I'll include them in the description below and everything. But I mean, without further ado, we've already gone the longest episode I think we've ever had. You want to tell folks where we both plan to be Thursday and Friday night?
Yeah, well, Thursday will be at Gormley, right? It's at Gormley, De La Salle, and Central. So we'll see DK Mays and KD Mays, and we'll see some of those youngsters at De La Salle. We actually have to get the name of the camper from De La Salle, who was one of our top performers. So we know that they have some young talent. Friday will be in Wildcat Stadium, the house that John Emery built, to see the star-studded matchup between those Catholic of Baton Rouge Bears and then Destrehan, which we didn't even come up in the draft, but we know on defense Jace Thomas, on offense Phillip Wright, a lot of youngsters along the way that we're all keeping tunes on for them. And then we have Saturday night, St. Aug and MAC 35. We have the number 1 player in the 2026 class, Jakeem Stewart, should be having some big news this week. And then we talked about Jakai a little bit at MAC 35 the consistent week 1 opener every single year. They always play on Saturday. It's always a great way. In years past, I've always gone to Texas this week. Now that I'm in Texas, I'm coming to Louisiana, ironically. But now I get to enjoy St. Aug and MAC 35 on a Saturday night. So that sounds great.
There was a game, it might have been when Joe Fouché and company were still at 35, but they played on like the Sunday or Monday because of weather issues coming through on Friday and Saturday. And so that game will just always stand out to me as a fun way to start the season for those teams. And they make sure to get it in one way or another. I'll be back-to-back college games Saturday with that Tulane K-State game and then Nichols versus LSU. But Thursday and Friday nights will be together for some great matchups. Looking forward to getting actually 4 quarters of Louisiana high school football on back-to-back nights after all of the preseason build-up with the scrimmages and jamborees.
There's nothing better in the world, and you know that.
Well, let's get the hell out of here because this is about twice as long as most of our episodes.
Josh already paused us and left us.
Well, as soon as I think I had 2 or 3 different John Ehret games as options along the way here. And so once we got to the point where Josh Preston realized the Monsters of Marrero were not in the fold for either one of these schedules, he's tuned out on football season on us entirely.
I'm excited to see what he's going to have after these games because I'm already getting hungry thinking about it.
Again, he's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Roser. Thanks, y'all, as always, for tuning in to Louisiana vs. All Y'all, and in particular, the Recruit Dat Boot show. We look forward to seeing y'all next week and, hearing from folks about what y'all see on Thursday and Friday night around the state.